You know what? What can one of these quarterbacks or wide receivers do for me this year to make a wager? It's got to be the running conditions there for Jaden Daniels.
In regards to Jaden Daniels, you know I was on him in regards to the Heisman Trophy. I actually think he's going to do it on the ground, through the air, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, playing in Cliff Kingsbury's offense where he wants to spread it and throw it. I think he's going to put up dynamic numbers.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Talk about your freshman year at Alabama and even the redshirt year that got you ready to perform at the highest level.
You had to learn a lot about humility, about being patient to play at Alabama. And you still knew that you're going to have a shot to win a championship every year. And so that's the line. And so I think that's what's really missing with today's football. You got NIL, you got social media.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome to hour number 2, live right here on this Football Friday on the Early Line on SportsGrid. He is Joe Ranieri. I am Ben Stevens. We are already deep into the Week 2 slate around the National Football League. Plenty of previews and picks come your way in this second hour. Hour 3, Joe Ranieri, a lot of college football conversations as well. And we're going to have to ask our guest in this second hour, your co-host on Sundays, Mike Blewitt, a college football conversation as well, because of the fact his Boston College Eagles, ranked 24th in the country, visit Columbia, Missouri tomorrow to take on the 6th-ranked Tigers in the only ranked versus ranked matchup that we have. We'll get a lot of that NFL insight from Big Blue on this Football Friday as well.
Yeah, I didn't see that happening, and I'm fairly certain when we ask Mike Blewitt if he had BC as a top 25 team at this point, I'm fairly certain he is going to say, yeah, no. But hey, and if they win that game, we're talking top 15, Ben. I mean, the sky is the limit here now for Boston College.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Trust in the chin. His name is Bill O'Brien. All right, Ranieri, in the early window on Sunday, 3 of the 4 best prices to win the NFC Championship, all in action. That includes the favorites out in that conference, the 49ers in Minneapolis, the Lions who played San Francisco in that NFC title game a season ago. They host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a playoff rematch from the divisional round a season ago. And the Dallas Cowboys, can they get to an NFC Championship game finally for the first time in nearly 3 decades? We talked a lot in the opening hour, Joe. We looked at the game in Kansas City, some market overreaction there between the Chiefs and the Bengals, perhaps. Maybe Sunday Night Football as well between the Texans and the Bears. How do you feel about this one? Dallas nearly a touchdown favorite at home against New Orleans. The Saints potentially had the most impressive victory of week number 1, 47-10, absolutely blowing out Carolina. And a Saints offense that was inept a year ago scores 47 points. Dallas, though, as a slight road underdog in Cleveland, wins outright on the very day that Dak Prescott became the richest player in National Football League history. Nearly a touchdown in favor of the boys at the Star in the home debut in Jerry World. What gives?
So we knew that the New Orleans Saints, our biggest concern with New Orleans coming to this year was the offensive line. Right? I believe their longtime right tackle ended up retiring. We weren't sure whether or not they were going to be able to recruit enough, draft enough, and sign enough to kind of offset that. And yet they were, I believe they ranked as the best pass rush offensive line last week. But I don't know if that's because Carolina is just absolutely terrible on the defensive side of the ball, or Clint Kubiak, is the offensive coordinator around in New Orleans. And boy, oh boy, the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. Derek Carr was using play action all over the place. He was dropping back and slinging it, and they were able to run the ball. So this is going to be Mike Zimmer against a Kubiak with Dallas and New Orleans. Derek Carr looked real comfortable there. Forget that it was Carolina. The play action, the weapons he has, and if that offensive line holds up, and Kubiak, his dad was one of the best schemers and block, navigators there is. The offensive lines were always amazing under him. If New Orleans can stand up against that pass rush of Dallas, we're going to get a lot of points in this game, man. I think we're going to get a ton of points in this game.
So you see that total, 46.5. The Cowboys scored 33. The Saints were the only team to go past 40 last week in week number 1. They were the best scoring offense of the weekend. Now, New Orleans to start last season, first month and a half with Derek Carr as its quarterback, struggle. 8th worst scoring offense in the National Football League, averaging just a tick over 18 points per game, but started to play better down the home stretch. They actually ended the regular season ranked in the top 10, averaging nearly 23.5 points per game. Again, 47 points last week against Carolina, and you see the total at 46.5. I think this game, Joe, has a really big chance for the Saints to kind of change the narrative around its team. Last year with Derek Carr entering the season, the divisional favorites in the NFC South. This year, kind of the forgotten team. The Bucs won a division for the 3rd straight year, and it was Kirk Cousins and the Falcons that had all the off-season love. Next up, we go to Detroit. Playoff rematch from a season ago in the divisional round. Baker Mayfield and the Bucs, Jared Goff and Detroit. The Lions winning in overtime against the Rams on Sunday Night Football to end out our first full Sunday slate, 26-20. Detroit covers as a 4.5-point home favorite. The Bucs were great against the Washington Commanders, winning comfortably 37-20 in the final score. Probably not even all that indicative of how good Tampa was. Baker Mayfield nearly 300 yards, 4 passing touchdowns. The Buccaneers easily covering as a 3.5-point home favorite. But now on the road, they're getting more than a touchdown. Detroit laying more than a touchdown in a playoff rematch from a season ago that also features, Joe, the only total north of 50 for Sunday, that highest number at 51 and a hook.
Yeah, opened at 48.5, and while the market told you what they thought of that number, as you mentioned, Ben, over 51.5. But it's interesting you brought up that matchup, that playoff battle back in January with these two teams, because let's look at that if we could. The Lions closed as a 6-point favorite against the Bucs in that playoff game, right?
Yeah.
The problem is the Tampa Bay defense is 10 times worse than it was on that team in January, while Detroit's defense, in between free agency and the draft, is much, much improved. Don't forget, Shaquille Barrett was the big Buccaneer edge rusher last year. They didn't re-sign him. They also lost Devin White this offseason. They also lost their starting quarterback, Carlton Davis, who, by the way, is on the Lions. And to make matters worse, Antoine Winfield out now after he got hurt, along with their starting quarterback, Zion McCollum. So they basically have nobody left in the secondary and the linebacking crew that represented that team a year ago in that playoff game. And yet they were a 6-point favorite there. It opened up at 6 here, and it's now up to 7.5, and I could not agree with the line move more. These are two totally different teams defensively, only the Lions got better and the Bucks got worse. Give me the Lions all day in a blowout here.
Ooh, 31-23, Detroit victorious last year in the division round. Total of 49.5 did go over. It was a one-score game. The Bucks had the football back late in the fourth quarter, deep in their own territory. Baker Mayfield ended up throwing his second pick of the afternoon. Last season, Joe, these two secondaries ranked in the bottom 6 around the NFL. Two of the 6 worst passing defenses around the National Football League, both giving up nearly 250 yards per game. And we saw that on display. Baker threw for 349 yards. Jared Goff, 287 and 2 touchdowns. Now let's go to the Twin Cities. Minneapolis back at home, hammering the New York Giants, but who amongst us has not? 28-6, the win in MetLife. But Sam Darnold, efficient, solid. Justin Jefferson catching a touchdown as well. San Francisco, great on Monday night, looking the ilk of the NFC frontrunner once again. 5.5-point spread in favor of the 49ers in Minneapolis, total 46.5. Christian McCaffrey not expected to play in this game for a second consecutive week. What do you like, Joe?
I like what they're doing with Sam Darnold. He completed his first 12 passes, and it wasn't dinking and dunking, Ben. 33% of those passes were over 10 or more yards. Watch out. Sam Darnold building a little confidence. And isn't this exactly where we fade the 49ers on the road? Isn't that how it works?
I think so. San Francisco has been a favorite in every single football game since the start of 2023. Now to the AFC contenders next.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You know what? What can one of these quarterbacks or wide receivers do for me this year to make a wager? It's got to be the running conditions there for Jaden Daniels.
In regards to Jaden Daniels, you know I was on him in regards to the Heisman Trophy. I actually think he's going to do it on the ground, through the air, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, playing in Cliff Kingsbury's offense where he wants to spread it and throw it. I think he's going to put up dynamic numbers.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
New to the Live Golf Plus app. Watch Live Golf any way you want it. Follow any group. Replay any shot. Anytime, anywhere. Any questions? Watch Live Golf live and on demand.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on this Football Friday on the Early Line. We focused on the NFC. Now we turn our attention to the AFC in this segment. Will Aaron Rodgers lead the Jets to a victory on Sunday in Nashville? Not an easy start to the year, perhaps, Joe, for New York, just based on travel and scheduling logistics to begin 2024. Monday night out in Northern California. Short week, back home for a few days. Head out to Nashville to take on the Titans. The schedule and the travel, not all that kind. Playing Tennessee after the display we saw out of Will Levis in week number 1, maybe that's a little bit better on paper. The Jets a 3.5-point road favorite, total of 41 and a hook. This line has been moving. It was 3.5, 4.5, now back down to just north of a field goal. How do you handicap the matchup in Tennessee on Sunday afternoon?
There's no way that you can trust Will Levis not to turn the ball over, especially when the defense gets ratcheted up. And I promise you the Jets defense will be better than they were against the 49ers. They're also not taking on the 49ers offense or offensive line here. So I do think the advantage Jets on defense. Aaron Rodgers, I have more faith in him not turning the ball over when it matters most. And much like we saw last night with Buffalo, you can't be careless with the ball, Tua, and that's exactly what ended up happening in that game. And I got the feeling, even though they're a home dog, man, how can you trust Will Levis and this Tennessee team if they're down to make enough smart plays and not turn the ball over against a Jets defense who's got to be hungry? I can only look the Jets here in this one.
This is one of my favorite spots on the entirety of the week to slate. I think Aaron Rodgers and the Jets perform very well. I think they can put up a lot of points, but mainly I think the defense responds. And that was the main concerning part, Joe, of Monday night. Not the rust of a 40-year-old quarterback coming off of a torn Achilles. A little bit of the ground game struggling against San Francisco perhaps, but the defense for the Jets, if they are going to snap the 13-year playoff drought, that's what was concerning. They get a golden opportunity against this Tennessee team. Will Levis can make me eat my words at some point. Never thought he would be a successful NFL quarterback. Do not expect that after what we saw week number 1. Perhaps the worst interception, and there's been a ton of bad ones, perhaps the worst interception these two eyes have ever seen. As he's falling, option pitch that was taken back by Chicago for the game-winning touchdown that resulted in Levis in the middle of the play on the field at Soldier Field doing a surrender cobra on his knees, a meme-ified moment of week number 1. Joe, if you had to guess, since Robert Saleh became the head coach of Gang Green, how many times have the Jets been booked as a favorite?
On the road, no less. Not maybe twice if we're lucky. Once.
So
I think
9 times in total, Joe.
9
times in total since the start of 2021. That's just as a favorite. As a road favorite, 4 times.
4
That's
times.
it.
Okay.
Robert Saleh became the head coach in 2021, and the New York Jets overall have been booked as a favorite only 9 times. A road favorite 4 times. They are 2-2 straight up as a road favorite. They are 5-4 straight up as a favorite overall. And they are 3-5-1 against the number. The only team booked as a favorite less than the New York Jets in the last now 3+ years be the other team in New York, the Giants, just 7 times. But that, to me, Joe, is a very fascinating case that we talked about on Tuesday following Monday night. Donnie and I were breaking it down Monday night, entering the season opener for Aaron Rodgers in Santa Clara. With a team expected to win double-digit games if Aaron Rodgers remains healthy, and a team expected and favored at close to a 2-1 price with a minus in front to snap the 13-season postseason drought, how often are they going to be booked as a favorite, or perhaps how many more times an underdog? They're a 3.5-point road favorite for what will be the 5th time in now 4 years under Robert Saleh, and the Jets are 18-34 in that span. Now let's focus on number 8 in white, not Will Levis. That's Aaron Rodgers. 227.5 is his prop. Joey only threw the football 21 times on Monday, or 23 times on Monday. The attempt prop was 33.5 against the Niners. Tom Vecchio loved the under. It was a great look. 32.5 is the number for week number 2. Do you think Aaron Rodgers and the Jets open it up a little bit more offensively on Sunday against the Titans?
Well, I think first and foremost, they are going to need to establish the run, right? They're going to need to get Breece Hall going. And I can promise you, if they have success on that front, Aaron Rodgers will pick them apart and have an opportunity. Now, keep in mind, though, that's a pretty good secondary that Tennessee has put together via the draft and free agency, including, Snead is now in that secondary, not Kansas City anymore. That's Sauce and company are going to have their hands full on one side. And I do think that secondary against Aaron Rodgers, that's why I think the running game is going to be valuable. If they can get it going, it's going to open everything up for Aaron Rodgers down the field.
73.5, the number 4, Breece Hall. Rushing plus receiving is 104 and a hook. Against the Niners, who were a top 5 rushing defense last year, only 68 yards on the ground as a team, just 3.6 yards per carry. The largest spread of the weekend is for the Ravens in their home opener back in Baltimore. 8.5-point number in favor of the Flock, Joe, against the Raiders. 41 and a hook is the total. Is this line of overreaction from how bad the Raiders were last week in Los Angeles?
Absolutely it is. There is no way in the world they should be laying this many points here against this team. Nothing about the Ravens offensively looked smooth and in midseason form in that game there. And I can promise you the defense of the Raiders is going to get theirs. I'm not buying it. No way they should be over a touchdown favorite.
The Raiders were coached by Antonio Pierce for 9 games as the interim. They won 5, and against the number, they were 7-1-1 against the spread. Just pay attention to that. More around week 2 Sunday next.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You know what? What can one of these quarterbacks or wide receivers do for me this year to make a wager? It's got to be the running conditions there for Jaden Daniels.
In regards to Jaden Daniels, you know I was on him in regards to the Heisman Trophy. I actually think he's going to do it on the ground, through the air, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, playing in Cliff Kingsbury's offense where he wants to spread it and throw it. I think he's going to put up dynamic numbers.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
New to the Live Golf Plus app. Watch Live Golf any way you want it. Follow any group. Replay any shot. Anytime, anywhere. Any questions? Watch Live Golf live and on demand.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
A few divisional duels on the Sunday Week 2 slate that feature teams from the NFC. Let's start in the NFC West, and we go to Arizona, where the Cardinals will play host to the LA Rams. And this is an intriguing line to me, Joe. Would love your thoughts as well. Arizona, home favorite, laying 1.5, -120 on the money line. The over-under stands at 47 and a hook. Jonathan Gannon became the head coach of the Cards last year to begin 2023. This will be his first game leading Arizona as a favorite, an underdog, all 18 that they have played under Gannon and covering by the hook despite blowing a 2-touchdown first-half lead against Buffalo last week in Western New York. They're now 10-8 against the spread under Jonathan Gannon. The Rams, the underdog here with a total of 47.5. Is the line correct? I know we're kind of splitting hairs here with a couple of cents on the money line, but should Arizona even be the slight home favorite?
Yeah, it's a tough spot here for both these teams. Number one, we saw, although I was impressed, I mean, listen, McVay is a genius offensively and what he's able to do. The problem with that Rams game, when you consider the fact that the Rams on the road against Detroit last week lost a couple of more members of the offensive line and were having to go makeshift, and they still took that game to overtime against that offense against Detroit, tells me that they are going to figure some things out. They can never be counted out, and that defense of Arizona is going to be a work in progress. It's very young. They spent draft assets on stocking up on that side of the ball. It's going to take them a little while, but this does feel like a Rams team on the road that is going to figure out ways to win games they probably shouldn't, and I think this is going to be one of them.
It's going to be really interesting because there's a couple of injury things that I believe lead us to Arizona being a slight favorite. Mainly the offensive line for LA, but of course we'll talk Puka Nacua, who is not expected to be back for Los Angeles for a few weeks. But you also look at the offensive line. Joe Noteboom, Rob Havenstein, and even their right guard missing in practice. That's Kevin Dotson. That's a very makeshift offensive line for the Rams that entered the season banged up and left Sunday night in the Motor City even more injured. I still think, though, Sean McVay, with a week to prepare for that, will figure things out for Los Angeles. We'll get to our pick six in hour number 3, but I like looking at LA as an underdog despite not a great track record winning games outright as a dog under Sean McVay. What do we do with this game, Ranieri? Also a 1.5 spread. Also -120 on the money line. The total down by about 5 points. 42 and a hook. Sunday afternoon in Washington. It's Jaden Daniels' home debut for the Commanders against the New York Giants. Everything in my core says Washington is winning this game outright. And if I only got to lay a 1.5 or just -120 of juice on that money line, give me the Commanders each and every time. But it feels a little bit tricky to me at this moment. What do you make of the divisional duel of these NFC East foes?
Yeah, it's Giants for me. And it's Giants all day long there. Listen, anybody who watched that game last week, Cliff Kingsbury did not take the reins off of Jaden Daniels. Everything he was throwing, Ben, I mean, there were no downfield shots. I think only 12.5% of his pass attempts actually reached 10 or more yards. Everything was about the running backs and the running game and trying to get some yardage that way there. The running backs were their leading receivers. I do think the Giants defense will have more luck against this rookie quarterback here than they did last week. I think everyone's looking towards Washington. I think there's going to be some growing pains there. And I do think Brian Dable and Daniel Jones will have some success moving the ball with Malik Neighbors in this one. It's Giants or pass for me in this one.
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to bet on the New York Giants, I think, at any time this year, but I don't know if I'm betting Washington laying -120 on that money line. You look at the final box score for Jaden Daniels. 88 yards on the ground, 2 rushing scores. Maybe looking at his rushing yards prop would be where I go. 17 of 24, $184. Actually had the best passing performance out of the 3 rookie quarterbacks that started week number 1. But a ton of those 184 yards, by my quick math, at least 70 came on the final touchdown drive, or at least 60 on that final touchdown drive to end out regulation. Mike Blewitt joins us next on this Football Friday.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You know what? What can one of these quarterbacks or wide receivers do for me this year to make a wager? It's got to be the running conditions there for Jaden Daniels.
In regards to Jaden Daniels, you know I was on him in regards to the Heisman Trophy. I actually think he's going to do it on the ground, through the air, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, playing in Cliff Kingsbury's offense where he wants to spread it and throw it. I think he's going to put up dynamic numbers.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
New to the Live Golf Plus app. Watch Live Golf any way you want it. Follow any group. Replay any shot. Anytime, anywhere. Any questions? Watch Live Golf live and on demand.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to a Football Friday live right here on the Early Line on SportsGrid. We'll look at the start of week number 2 Thursday night in Miami. We'll also set the stage for the rest of the week 2 Sunday slate around the NFL. We do so with a regular and a constant here on a Football Friday that signifies a Football Friday on the Early Line. Mike Blewitt. I am Ben Stevens. Joe Ranieri over on the left side as well, or right side of your screen, my left. But, Blue, before we dive into the National Football League and everything we need to discuss, we start with a little college football question, my friend, because your Boston College Eagles are involved in the only ranked versus ranked top 25 tilt on the entirety of the Saturday Week 3 slate in college football. Just as we all expected, Missouri and BC are only ranked matchup. In Columbia, the Tigers, a 16.5-point home favorite, total 53 in a ranked versus ranked matchup. Your BC Eagles, the lid on. Seems a little bit disrespectful to have a 3-score spread.
Ben, I'm happy for everybody to keep doubting those Eagles. Obviously, they're off to a good start. Missouri off to an incredible start against Missouri State and Buffalo. They have yet to allow a point. I think we'll break that streak. We won't be scoreless. And I just think the Bill O'Brien addition clearly has made such a massive difference. I think all three of us know that coaching in college football is tantamount to being able to transform your program, and he has done that in a couple of short weeks. They have a long way to go in order to be able to produce offensively consistently, but they've done a great job defensively, and they've taken care of business against an inferior opponent and against a Florida State team that's probably not what we thought it was.
Definitely not what anybody thought they were there, but you got to love Bill O'Brien. He's got, listen, the hardest part about a NFL guy coming to college ranks is getting the kids to buy in, and the results have been there early. So I do think it's going to be a fun year to keep an eye on what BC can do. It was not fun for Miami Dolphin fans last night, Blewitt. In fact, it was a nightmare unfolding in front of them there with the injury to Tua and the concussion. What were your takeaways there? What did you see last night?
So I don't want to be critical of Tua in any way. I'm just surprised he didn't slide. I think we've all been concerned about this for the last year or more, and I think it has the opportunity to totally transform the path that the Miami Dolphins are going down. There's no guarantee that Tua can come back anytime soon, if ever. So Mike McDaniel just got that extension a couple of weeks ago, and you have to wonder what his path forward will be. I'm not suggesting that he's on a hot seat of any kind, but I listened to you earlier in the show, and I think you nailed a lot of the things. Buffalo is really utilizing Josh Allen in the best ways that he can. We don't know if that's a great long-term plan, because as you try to do this over the course of 4 months, it doesn't matter the size or the speed or the ability of the quarterbacks. If they're taking hits all the time, it's going to wear them down. I thought it was interesting to see Khalil Shakir take a step forward in the offense. They're really only guys that obviously had to run their offense in the first half. So what we saw in the second half was really running clock, especially after was injured. So good news early for the Bills. I have still questions about what they can do defensively. Good to see them get the turnovers last night, even though a couple of them were fluky.
Yeah, absolutely, Blue. And when you look at this game, of course, there's a lot that will be said for the Dolphins in the coming days. What the future is of Tua Tagovailoa, we're not going to project that out at this moment. But there's the good of what Buffalo did. And in the opening half, with everybody healthy, the Bills were dominant. And when you look at the AFC East divisional odds now and the overall outlook for both teams, of course, Miami's odds have been altered by the uncertainty around Tua Tagovailoa. So our focus is on the Bills, plus 105 to win the AFC East, the shortest price we have seen on Buffalo at any point since the odds became available to win the AFC or a Lombardi Trophy, 6-1, 11-1, respectively. Blue, it's a new-look Buffalo team really on both sides of the football, and there were some questions for the Bills to be answered throughout 2024. But they're booked as the favorites to win the AFC East now for what would be a fifth consecutive season. Does it feel fitting to have Buffalo as the AFC East favorites right here, right now?
It's pretty short. We're clearly what happened last night is impacting the odds quite a bit, but you have to understand we're going to find out a lot more about the Bills in the next month. We've got Jags at Ravens, at Texans, at Jets. That's the next month for the Bills. So congrats on the win going down to Miami and getting it, and in week one coming back and getting the victory over the Cardinals. But this next month is going to could be vastly different from what they saw in the first 2 weeks. The Cardinals are a team that are being built, and Miami is obviously a team that's currently in disarray. So assuming that the Ravens and the Texans and the Jets are, and the Jaguars are who we think they can be over the course of the next month, this Bills competition could be brutal. And if they came out of it 1-3, it wouldn't stun anybody, I don't think, listening or talking about it right now. This is going to get a lot harder for them. And I think the defense is going to have to be the side that shows me more. Allen and James Cook and getting Shakir and Kincaid involved is a good thing. We'll see more of that, but the defense is going to have to be the one that brings it to the table. They've lost way too many players for us to assume that they're going to be the Bills that they were a year or two ago.
Gotta love the overreaction in week 2 here in the NFL. And one of the games Ben and I talked about earlier, the marquee matchup, it'll be in the late slate of games, is Cincinnati traveling to Kansas City. This line opened up 6.5, almost a touchdown, in fact. But now looks like the market influencers aren't quite sold that this Bengals team is going to get run over. And why would they? They tend not to against Mahomes here. What do you think of this matchup?
So I think there is clearly people reacted quite a bit to that being a big line. These teams have played each other tight in the past. I would say, though, I think this could be the fourth time in the last 6 years that the Bengals start off 0-2. So Zach Taylor is bringing a lot of these 0-2 starts to the table before they turn things around. I'd say Cincinnati played as bad as any team did last week. It looked like they were still in preseason mode. I will say that the angle I like in this game, because of the way that these two teams have played each other and tend to play week over week, is the second half under. The Kansas City Chiefs last season were the lowest scoring second half defense, and Cincinnati was a top 10 scoring defense in the second half. We see Lou Anarumo, their defensive coordinator, and Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator, really locked things down in the game. So at 20.5, that's too high for me. That's the number that I'm most in favor of in this game. And Isaiah Pacheco, I think, establishing his rushing attack, his number is inflated quite a bit over the last few days. So make sure your number, but I would take anything over 63.5.
Cincy now the sixth best price to win the AFC Championship at 10-1. Some market regression, understandably so. Losing the season opener at home, booked as more than a touchdown favorite against New England. The Chiefs plus 290 to win the AFC. Still two AFC contenders, at least that is the thought right now. Quickly here, Blue. Sunday Night Football in Houston. The Texans laying near a touchdown at home against Caleb Williams and Chicago. Total 45.5. What's your play for Sunday night?
Interesting one. I'm going to stick with a primetime under. We've hit a couple here in a row. I think that we need to see more of the Bears offense. They got the win. Congrats to Caleb. Caleb wasn't particularly good. Scored a couple of defensive and special teams touchdowns, so they didn't really put much up. I like the Texans to control this game and keep it under. I don't see an explosive matchup at all Sunday night until we see more out of the Bears.
Houston now has the expectations, and as the favored side under C.J. Stroud, including last week in the opener in Indy, just 3-6 against the number as a favorite. We'll see what Chicago does as a dog. More to come on a Football Friday next.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You know what? What can one of these quarterbacks or wide receivers do for me this year to make a wager? It's got to be the running conditions there for Jaden Daniels.
In regards to Jaden Daniels, you know I was on him in regards to the Heisman Trophy. I actually think he's going to do it on the ground, through the air, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, playing in Cliff Kingsbury's offense where he wants to spread it and throw it. I think he's going to put up dynamic numbers.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
New to the Live Golf Plus app. Watch Live Golf any way you want it. Follow any group. Replay any shot. Anytime, anywhere. Any questions? Watch Live Golf live and on demand.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Let's continue diving through the Sunday slate on this Football Friday with our very own Mike Blewitt. A couple of questionable quarterbacks now have answers to make on Sunday. Let's start, Blue, in Jacksonville. At Trevor Banks Stadium, the Jags home opener against the Cleveland Browns. Now, there are some off-the-field issues, once again, with Deshaun Watson. Another sexual assault accuser of Watson came forward this week. She is set to meet with the National Football League, as he has maintained. Watson denies any wrongdoing. As for the football perspective, Deshaun Watson has been absolutely abysmal in the 12 games he has played as Cleveland's starting quarterback. His poor performance, of course, could not happen to a worse guy. So we take all of this to Jacksonville. The Jags, a 3-point home favorite. Trevor Lawrence was great in the opening half for Jacksonville. They were blanked last week on the road in Miami. 41 and a hook is the total. The Jags, a 3-point favorite, Blue. What do you like in this matchup?
I think it has the potential to be pretty ugly. I'm leaning towards an under again here. The Browns Watson is clearly going to be the story week in, week out for them, and they bring a lot to the table defensively at times, but they're also working with an offensive line that is not what they need it to be right now. They got a couple of guys on IR that they're hoping to come back and contribute, but without Nick Chubb there, a subpar offensive line, clearly a subpar quarterback, I don't know what you can expect out of them. I think you're going to start looking at team totals as well for the Browns and for the Jags. Team total for the Browns this week, 19.5. So it's indicative of how folks really are not respecting them. I don't think the Browns can get to 20 points this week. So in general, I like the Jags laying 3, but I'm more partial to an under or a Browns team under in this one.
So here we go again with your Steelers and a road under like we had again last week. Now back on the road, Mile High, taking on Bo Nix, who, listen, I thought was pretty decent in that debut, even though he did have some turnovers in that one. But what it just feels like, oh, look at it, Tomlin on the road, another under.
Begging you to take the over, right? Begging you to take the over at 36.5. And I'll tell you, Joe and I watched every second of that game together. We were never getting to 30 in Atlanta. Never. Mm-mm. They could have played 2 more quarters. Maybe Boswell would have put through another field goal, maybe. But the Steelers' offense, again, wasn't pretty. Nothing in the red zone for them. Fields executed some big third down plays, but when they needed some first downs to consistently get the offense going, they couldn't. On the flip side, the defense was awesome. And that was against Kirk Cousins and an offensive line, both of whom we'd say on paper are better than the Broncos offensive line and Bo Nix. So I think Bo Nix is going to have a tough time. Again, we can look at a team total under for the Broncos. I don't think this gets to 37 points. I'd be surprised. One thing to note is that you will consistently see Najee Harris get a lot of carries this season and certainly right now. And I just think that needs to be a part of your approach to games with the Steelers. I don't think they're going to air it out too much. I've thought for months that it's going to be a conservative game plan regardless of who's under center. Najee's going to get a lot of touches. So you can look for rush attempts, rushing yardage overs for Najee Harris is an interesting trend to keep in mind.
Bo Nix in his debut last week against the 12s in Seattle, 26 of 42, 138 yards, did not have a touchdown pass, but 2 interceptions. Did have a rushing score to make it a single-digit game and give a little bit of life to Denver in the fourth quarter. But when the announcer calling the game, Adam Archuleta for CBS, sees the quarterback throw the football, and before the ball is even in the hands of either a receiver or a DB, and goes, oh no, it's not necessarily the best thing. Now, I did bet Bo Nix's season-long rookie passing prop at 28.50 and a hook to the over. Not a great start for me. Neither is his prop on Sunday, 166.5 against Pittsburgh. What is interesting in this matchup, of course, is the quarterbacks on the other side for the Steelers. Mike Tomlin telling reporters earlier this week they are slated to start Justin Fields for a second consecutive week. No props out just yet, though, for Pittsburgh, either in pass yards or any other categories. We know how good the Steelers have been under Tomlin as an underdog, even in the last season plus. Since the start of 2023, Pittsburgh 7-5, both straight up and against the number, as an underdog, including the outright victory in Atlanta. As a favorite last season, 4-3 against the spread. This, to me, Blue, is one of the most compelling spots on the board for Sunday in Lambeau. The Packers' home debut for a team that entered the year with a ton of optimism. How has that changed? With Jordan Love on the shelf, not placed on injured reserve, which is positive, but not expected to play, of course, on Sunday against the Colts. Indianapolis, 3-point road favorite as Malik Willis gets the start for Green Bay. How do you see this football matchup playing out in Wisconsin on Sunday afternoon?
I will say him not being on the IR is also maybe indicative of their level of desperation, right? They don't have great options to go to, and I think in some ways, it could be I don't think the Packers are a panicky organization, but I think it's indicative of when we hear that he's out 3 to 4 weeks, and they're like, maybe let's not put him on IR yet. Look, when you've given the guy $250 million and you need him, you shouldn't be able to sit him out for 4 weeks and be able to move forward. So I'm a little concerned about how desperate they may become to force him back into the action. Now, that Colts-Texans game was awesome. I really thought that was the best game last week, and I thought the Colts proved a lot, even though they were at home and they take an L. That's against a really spirited Texans team that has a lot of offense to bring to the table. So I'm impressed with the Colts. I do give them the chance to go on the road and get the upset here. Great weapons for the Packers, but when have we seen Malik Willis be able to do anything? It's going to have to be the Josh Jacobs show, and I don't know that they can do it. I like the Colts in this.
167.5 is the pass yards prop for Malik Willis. He has made 3 career starts. He has never thrown a touchdown. He has only thrown 3 interceptions. More next.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
You know what? What can one of these quarterbacks or wide receivers do for me this year to make a wager? It's got to be the running conditions there for Jaden Daniels.
In regards to Jaden Daniels, you know I was on him in regards to the Heisman Trophy. I actually think he's going to do it on the ground, through the air, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, playing in Cliff Kingsbury's offense where he wants to spread it and throw it. I think he's going to put up dynamic numbers.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
The only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
New to the Live Golf Plus app. Watch Live Golf any way you want it. Follow any group. Replay any shot. Anytime, anywhere. Any questions? Watch Live Golf live and on demand.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
If Mike Blewitt is here, it means it's a Football Friday, and it means we break down every single matchup around the weekend and Sunday slate in the NFL. Let's talk some interconference intrigue for the games that we have on Sunday. No more surprising victory weekend number one than the Patriots winning outright as a 7.5-point dog in Cincinnati against the Bengals. If you bet the over of New England's win total at 4.5, the lowest entering this season, that was one you did not expect to get you to at least 5, so you might be feeling pretty good if you even had the stones to bet the over for New England. Seattle, pretty good at home against Bo Nix and the Broncos in his debut. They cover as a 5.5-point favorite, winning by 6, but the final score wasn't truly indicative of how in control Seattle was of that football game, especially in the second half. The Seahawks, a 3.5-point favorite, Blue, on the road in Gillette Stadium against the Patriots on Sunday afternoon. Second lowest total of the weekend at 38.5. What do you like? Can the Pats start 2-0 or at least cover a number for a second straight week?
I think entirely possible. I don't think they're hiding their game plan at all. It's very straightforward. The Bengals ran 48 plays, and that's because the Pats were taking the air out of the ball. They had an 8.5-minute touchdown drive. The Pats only ran 63 plays, and it's not like they set the world on fire offensively, but that's what they're going to try to do. They are far better defensively than they are offensively. Credit to Brissett for managing the game that way, but Ramondre Stevenson getting out tons of touches is what you're going to see week in, week out this year. Again, I'm leaning towards an under, but not all these games can go under. I happen to think it's going to be a low-scoring week in the NFL, and I think you start to, again, look at team total. Right now, based on the way the Seahawks played, I'm inclined to say take the 3.5. However, I do think it's important early in the season to note that we are still getting some value on teams based on early season results. We talked about how the Bills are just getting a huge credit for the 2 wins thus far, which are good wins, but we're not impressed with them handling their business against a Miami team in disarray and a Cardinals team that has a long way to go. I just think that there's too much influence with early season results, and you have to wonder if the Seahawks and the Pats played 3 or 4 weeks from now, would this really be a 3.5-point line? If the Seahawks ripped off a couple of wins and we see what the Pats are really going through offensively, I think you might be getting some value here on the Seahawks, even though they are a road favorite.
The game that everyone's going to be looking at without a doubt here, Blewitt, has got to be the battle of terrible versus terrible. Although, listen, Carolina can't be as bad as they looked, right? I say it all the time. It feels like every week with you, right? It can't get worse, right? It can't get any worse. Well, taking on the Chargers, how much worse could it get here, Blewitt?
They stink. We could talk about the disappointing performances by the Bengals and everybody. There's no question that the team that played the worst football is the Panthers. I will say the Giants gave them a run for their money, but the Panthers were awful. They were down 30-0 at halftime. I have made plays in this game. I took the Chargers team total over in the first half. It's only 10.5, and their first quarter total is only 4.5. You can take all the rushing prop attempts that you want. I think they're going to try to run it down their throat like they did last week. Joe, you and I hit the J.K. Dobbins over prop last week. They said that he's going to ride the hot hand, but it's clear that Dobbins is getting a chance. Derek Brown, the Panthers' best defender, is out for the season. So what are they going to do? I have no idea what they're trying to do defensively here. I think this is all Chargers. I don't think it's going to be fancy, but I think they're going to run it down their throats. And I'd look for those team total overs for the Chargers, particularly in the first half as they are establishing the run and the Panthers try to figure out how to live without Derek Brown.
And as I will share in our pick 6, I still think J.K. Dobbins' number is slightly light this week against Carolina. Blue, you mentioned Ramondre Stevenson getting a ton of touches for New England, that being the game plan. 25 carries, $120 against Cincy, and a touchdown. His attempts prop still 16.5. Bryce Young, to start off his sophomore season. 13 of 30 for a $161 and 2 INTs. The guy has thrown for more than 250 yards once in his NFL career. He has been under 200 in 9 of the last 10 games. Mike Blewitt, we'll see you with Joe Ranieri on Sunday. We appreciate the time as always. Hour 3 up next.